What's going on, guys? It's your boy Tom Talks Rubbish, and today I'm back with another video. And in this video I am going to be discussing my top 10 favourite episodes of a TV show called Castle. For those of you that didn't see my previous video where I ranked every season of Castle from worst to best, it is essentially a TV show, a crime drama about a mystery author who follows a NYPD detective around to research his novels, but it's more than that because they both have origin stories as to why they do what they do. They eventually fall in love. Also, guys, this is a massive spoiler alert right now. If you haven't seen the show and want to, turn this off right now because I will be spoiling episodes as I talk about them. So yeah, they basically fall in love, they get married and bits like that. It's a male mystery writer and a female. It's a male mystery writer called Richard Castle and a female homicide detective called Kate Beckett. Richard Castle is played by Nathan Fillion, and Stana Katic, I think that's how you say her name, plays Kate Beckett. So let's get into it, guys, with my first episode being, my number 10 favourite episode being, I can't find the list now. Here we go. Number 1 fan, which is episode 4 from season 6. In this episode, Richard Castle is forced to negotiate a hostage situation when his essential number 1 fan holds people hostage after she is accused of the murder of her boyfriend. I really like this episode because it shows Richard Castle having to be a bit tough and like actually investigate and negotiate things, rather than just make up a fanciful theory. And he actually comes up with, he sees something, he basically figures out that she's innocent because of how she writes her text to her boyfriend, and look, these texts were staged. So yeah, but you also see that the girl has a paternity issue, and we find out more about her past. And at this point, Richard and Kate are engaged, so I really enjoy seeing that dynamic as well. And yeah, I just enjoy this episode. Number 9 is Hollander's Woods, which is from season 7, and it's episode 23. This was actually the finale of season 7, and how I thought they should have ended the show. Because, as you guys saw in the ranked video, I didn't really enjoy season 8. So in this episode, we basically find out why Castle is driven to find out the story of everything, because that's what he brings to the table as a crime fighter. So it basically, we find out that when he was a kid, he saw a woman's body and she was murdered by a serial killer in basically a porcelain mask. It sounds like something out of one of his books. So this is what drew, and he never could figure out why she was killed and bits like that. So he basically is driven to find out the story because he could never finish his first one, basically. And also we have a B story in this where Kate is going for the captain's exam because she's a detective, but she wants to become captain of the NYPD. And she essentially is we find out that she's not only being considered for captain, but they want her to run for state senate because of how she stands up for people. I really like, there's a scene in this episode where she's basically, as a test, I suppose, is basically attacked verbally by the committee, and she really has to stand up for herself, her relationship with Castle, his fictional representation of her, how she solves crimes, how she dealt with her own mother's murder investigation, which I'll get into in a bit. So yeah, but overall, the main reason I feel like they should have ended the series with this episode is because Castle accepts an award. That's basically another story that's running through the episode. And he gives this amazing speech thanking his family, his colleagues at the 12th precinct, and Kate especially, claiming that he would have never wrote again if they hadn't met. So I feel like that would have just been a nice way to end the series, really. Number 8 is Veritas, which is season 6, episode 22. In this episode, we finally figure out, we know throughout the series who killed Kate's mother, but he's finally arrested. It is a New York senator called Senator Bracken. And we basically find out that basically, in an episode I'll get to in a minute, there was a tape that was found where he basically confessed to everything. So they find the tape and are able to arrest him. But I really like how all the conspiracy that's been building up throughout the show's history is finally tied together. But one really emotional moment I like is when he's arrested. Kate and Richard have this very emotional scene where she basically says, "I could have never done this without you pushing me to do it," and it gets very sappy and emotional, and I really like that episode. But next one is number 7, which is Castle PI, which is season 7, episode 11. This episode shines Castle in a different light, because he's actually forced to investigate rather than come up with a different theory each time, because in the previous episode, he was basically banned from working with the NYPD, so he becomes a private investigator, obviously with the hopes that he can work with Kate again, and then he basically runs a parallel investigation to hers into a murder that she's investigating. And I really like how Castle has to be resourceful and not look up records and stuff, so he finds her work through her neighbours rather than official records. He figures out what trouble she was into by talking to a man who looks after her dog. He figures out who was behind the murder. He figures out that the prime suspect couldn't have done it because he knows that he has a dog allergy, and you basically see that if Castle hadn't been a writer, he would have made a hell of a cop, which I really enjoy, and it shows him in a different light, and the almost competition aspect of who's going to solve the murder first, I really enjoy. Next one is number 6, and it's Time of Our Lives, which is again from season 7, and it's episode 6. In this episode, Castle essentially gets a concussion whilst on a case, and dreams that him and Beckett never met. He basically flashes forward to it. He goes back to the precinct and finds that she doesn't know him, her colleagues don't know him, which I find really cool. And I like how, even though Castle still loves her and everything, but they've never met, they still have these little connections, and it feels like they've known each other for years. Like, for example, she still reads Derek Storm books, who is a character Castle created before. She becomes a captain, because that's the thing that she says in the beginning. Like, in a jokey way, she's like, "If I'd never met you, I might be captain by now." And he says that he worked on his second, a big book or something, I'm not really sure. But we see that her life was great, she did become captain, but his basically fell apart. Because he never wrote again after Derek Storm, his life savings were gone, his mother, who is basically a theatre actress, but basically goes out and finds even more success. His daughter, who is basically daddy's little girl, becomes a bit of a rebel because they argue so much, and she sees him in such a pitiful way that she then moves to LA, and I really like that aspect of it. But overall, the main thing I like is they finally get married at the end of this episode, which is amazing. I just love the wedding. I love how tender and sweet it is. And yeah, that's the main reason I like this episode. Number 5 is Sucker Punch. This is from season 2, episode 13. In this episode, throughout the series, Castle has basically been looking into Beckett's mother's murder. And at the end of season 1, they basically thought about it and stopped working together for a time, but eventually made up, blah, 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 blah. And that got put on the back burner until a drug kingpin was murdered, and it turns out he was murdered in the same way as Beckett's mother's Beckett's mother. And so they find the hit. And my most favourite bit of this episode is there's a twist where the drug kingpin's brother, who you think is this good guy who builds schools in Afghanistan and things like that, turns out to be a hitman, and he killed his brother because he found out. So I really like that dynamic. But the main reason I love this episode is the ending, where Beckett is forced to shoot the hitman before he can tell her who hired him to save Castle's life. So, and then as the hitman dies, I love the fact that Castle then comes up to her and says, I can't shadow you anymore because without me, you would have found out who killed her. But Beckett reassures him and tells him, if it wasn't for you, I never would have found out who killed my mother. So please stay until I find her. And I really like that sweet moment, and you can tell, even though they're not quite together yet, how much they really care for each other, and I find that really cool. Number 4 is Probable Cause. This is from Season 5, and it's Episode 5. In this episode, a serial killer called 3XK, who appeared in a Season 3 episode, I can't remember off the top of my head, and is later found out to be someone called Jerry Tyson, reappears and basically frames Castle for one of his murders. And I like the dynamic of everyone else believing Castle did it. Like their captain, Beckett's colleagues, Ryan and Esposito, who I haven't mentioned yet, but who are the actual stars of the show. They are a Cuban. Esposito is a Cuban-American detective who has his own past and dynamics. And Ryan is an Irish-American who also has his own past and dynamics, but I think is really cool. I will probably do a video talking about all the characters in the future, but we'll get to that. So, yeah, in this episode, the only person that believes Castle didn't do it is Beckett. So I really like that dynamic and how she does everything in her power to find out who did it. And I really like the ending of this episode where 3XK is killed, or it looks like he's killed because he's shot off a bridge by Castle. He shoots him off of a bridge, but he's not actually killed, but that's how the episode leaves it, thinking he's dead, but the only one that believes he isn't is Castle. He turns out to be right, but I digress. Number 3 is Knockout. This is from Season 3, and it's Episode 23, which is the Season 3 finale. One reason I love this episode, Montgomery's death scene. Montgomery was Beckett's captain before the current captain, who is Victoria Gates. He basically mentored all the people in this. He's friends with Castle, and he's nice. But we find out in this episode that he's part of the string of dirty cops whose dirty dealings basically led to Beckett's mother's death. And he's killed because he sacrificed himself for Beckett. He's basically told by the hitmen that are after her, give us her or we'll kill your family. So he sacrifices himself, so neither of them has to die. And I love the fact that Beckett pleads with him to let him fight, but he's forced to bring Castle along to get her out of it. And you just see him gently covering her mouth so she doesn't scream, so the guys don't hear her. And basically Montgomery manages to shoot all the hitmen, and it looks like he's about to survive it, but finally one, as he turns around, shoots him in the chest, and that's it. And yeah, and again, but the main reason I like this episode is the cliffhanger. It's Beckett is shot at Montgomery's funeral, and this is where Richard confesses that he loves her, and that scene gets me every time. Number 2 is Cops and Robbers. This is from Season 4, and it's Episode 9. In this episode, Castle and his mother, Martha, are held hostage in a bank robbery by people posing as doctors. I really like the way that the castle manages to help solve the case even though he's a hostage. I really like the fact that it isn't just about a robbery, it's about a safety deposit box, and there's a hostage you think is a hostage but it turns out to be involved, and I just really enjoyed this episode. And number one is, and just to note guys, I rewrote this list about 4 times and everything changed apart from my number one pick, which was number 1, which is episode 1 from season 1, Flowers for Your Grave. Pardon me. I feel like this might be the greatest TV pilot ever, if not at least second best. And I just love this episode because you get to see all the dynamics between Beckett and Castle and how they first met and stuff, and the fact that Castle was, even though he was a successful writer, in the back of his mind he still had to come up with another book, and he had writer's block, and it wasn't until someone started killing off people in the same way that he kills people in his books that he found inspiration, because he began working with Beckett. And I love their dynamic when they first meet. I love Castle's just belief that the most obvious suspect didn't do it because it was, quote, too easy and the reader would never buy it. But yeah, I just love this episode, guys. And I love the ending where Montgomery is basically like, Castle needs to do research, and he is just at the door smiling, and that just makes me laugh every time. And yeah, those are my top 10 favourite episodes of Castle. Let me know yours in the comments below. Also, I would really like to thank the Facebook group Castle Fans for allowing me to promote my videos there. And if you have any suggestions for Castle topics I should do in the future, let me know. And I'll see you in the next one, guys. Bye!